Welcome back, my dear viewer, to another video on CheeseBurger Crusade. You may recall last time I reviewed every boss from the main game and went over what I saw as its fatal flaw, that its best fights were locked behind limited time events. So why are we here again if most if not everything was covered? Well, you see, sometime after the video went live, Corrupt, the developer, chose to open up portals to most of the events, allowing players to permanently be able to play them. Such events will allow us to get a grander look at the universe of CheeseBurger Crusade, fight an onslaught of bosses, and see Corrupt's creative skills in whole. The game has changed, and so have I. So let's finally dig into the meat of Corrupt's portfolio, starting with one of the earliest available events in the timeline, Wicked Woods. Our first event follows a campaign sort of gameplay, with you and your team reaching choke points that need to be unlocked to progress, all while enemies hound you from all angles. The choke part of the choke point being these altars called fright holders that you need to hold down while your team keeps the ghouls occupied. You also get small obstacle courses or puzzles, but this is the core gameplay. The free items at your disposal are a basic sword, a hammer that can be used to deal massive damage, especially when used on the head, and a candy bag for healing to balance the amount of damage you'll be taking late game. Wicked Woods has two boss encounters, Haunt and Redback. Honestly, I don't have much to say about the former, but the latter is interesting enough as it highlights the main appeal of this game mode to me. Oh, and I guess that's foreshadowed by cobwebs appearing throughout the event before you reach his camp. Redback is an assassin hired by Sir Frightsworth, who under most circumstances would be incredibly difficult to damage due to his tricky melee. However, by jumping on his head, Redback will attack only you while not being able to actually land a hit. This leaves him open to attack from your team. The main appeal for me here is the teamwork aspect. When you're holding down fright holders, you'll be unable to attack, otherwise you disable the button prompt and have to start all over again, making you reliant on your team. The bosses are tag team encounters where you attack, get damaged, and then let the next guy come in and take the hits while you heal. It's rather simple, but addicting nonetheless. The enemies themselves also deserve a shout out. One trend I like to put a pin on when it comes to these multiplayer events is that Corrupt loves giving every one or two enemies a gimmick to make them unique. The Executioner one-shots you if you somehow get hit, Witches will kamikaze after death, Stalkers are fast, almost invisible, and deal a lot of damage quickly, need to be constantly checked for, etc. This really helps to flesh out the cast of enemies and make these basic encounters more engaging. With that aside, after being Redback, a portal will form leading to a chaotic castle. Upon reaching the portal on the other side, you'll be treated to Frightsworth's lair. He laments about you killing Redback, even though we didn't, and also why does he care? He explicitly states the Haunt Brothers meant little to him, so what's the difference? And what's the point of including this dialogue anyway? Nah, whatever. The writing is never the allure of coming here anyway. What we're here for is to kill Frightsworth. He has relatively similar attacks as Redback, only doing a lot more damage, so employ the same tactics for the most part to beat him. Do watch out for the various enemies he sends out, especially those stalkers. Sounds real simple at first, but tank his health enough, and he starts going mad, eventually breaking the castle and revealing his true identity of the Fright Geist, a mad spirit using Frightworth's body as a vessel to achieve immortality. A spectacle if I've ever received one. In fact, I'll place down a second pin and say this right here is another trend and perk of Corrupt's projects. Cause if there's one thing he knows how to do best, it's create a set piece. While the building for this event is pretty mediocre, the large arenas, grand entrances, and money shots like this redeem it in my eyes. This is especially true for when you take the final blow to end the event. Frightgeist recoils back, kneels to you and compliments your skill, before flying to the center and exploding in a massive ball of void matter. I can't lie, this is cool as hell. Regarding the gameplay of his fights, I used to hate the guy for reasons I'll get into shortly, but looking back now, I actually kinda like how chaotic his fight is. Pulling out all the stops with big flashy attacks that cover the whole arena to keep you on your toes, even directing your attention to 2 vitality orbs at one point to keep you occupied. Heck, most people I played with hated the stalkers in this fight. But honestly, I like how they add to the chaos of keeping your eyes on the Frightgeist while looking out for them in the rain. That being said, one thing I didn't like is how much of a damage sponge he is. His fight takes up more than half of the event most of the time, and after a while the chaos becomes very repetitive. This is true for the whole event as well. There's a lot of padding to be had. For example, you have these long stretches of walking from one area to the next where nothing really happens. At one point, there's an obby reminiscent of Nightmare's opening act. And playing it again, the jumps are quite tight, almost like it wants you to die and have to walk all the way back. And remember those fright holders at the start? These things are basically designed for padding. You have to hold E for 15 seconds without letting go, or you have to start all over again. If someone has to stand there to activate it, couldn't it be something that at least lets the player still be involved in the action? Speaking of which, the action itself is pretty lame. These various enemies I speak of having unique gimmicks are not necessarily needed to beat to progress. Just stall until the gate is open and then book it. Makes you wonder what the point of having so many enemy types is. Thankfully, this is fixed by the time you get to the Haunt mini boss, having them be just another threat along with the boss's attacks. But still, most of the enemies don't need to be killed to progress. These fright holders also make it impossible to defeat this event solo, as to my knowledge, you can't attack while holding them. So you have to have a team to beat it. Unfortunately, and I'm aware this is of no fault of Corrupt, this game gets no players, so you have to reach out for a team of people on alternative sites to be able to get the full experience. This goes for all multiplayer campaigns and coming events as well. But despite all its flaws, I can still say I enjoyed Wicked Woods at points, and I can't fault it too much. This is one of Corrupt's first events. Most people don't come out the gate swinging, which is all I can say for Wicked Woods. Normal mode. If you know where to find it, you can activate hard mode, which only the most masochistic will be able to beat. Try it, if you dare. Now before we begin, this event recently got an update making it more up to code with Corrupt's newer works. So while first dropped in 2020, what I'm talking about now is a more modern interpretation. Arctic Village sees you at the battleground of a soon beginning war between two nations, and one eternal flame you need to protect with your life. Instead of a full campaign this time, you'll be fighting in one area as enemies flood out of a single cave entrance. Given a sword and gun, you're ushered into the first wave of Frost soldiers. This event follows a similar structure to Wicked Woods, some waves of enemies, a mini-boss, a real boss, and the final boss with a new set piece to boot. So I'm just going to get into what I like here. Firstly, the previously mentioned nav structure and wave progression fixes Wicked Woods' problem of having so many enemies but no reason to really engage with them, as defeating them is necessary to not get hounded by them. And the enemies themselves commit to filling a role more so than the previous event. You got designated enemies for kamikazes, brutes, marksmen, mages, and infantry. With the added bonus of fitting the aesthetic, the enemies need to be learned individually to properly avoid. The mini-boss and boss fight here have been given a major upgrade from their original versions. I especially love the latter. Flurry, having his own version of Frightgeist Vitality Orbs and calling in the fucking airstrike to get your ass. And of course, enemies will keep flooding in, meaning someone's gotta take the bait and deal with them. Overall, this is more well-rounded than Wicked Woods, however, it's not void of flaws. So let's rewind. My main concern is our kit. Any complexity in fighting is completely reliant on event weapons, is what I would say back when the event weapons were allowed. Now the only one is a gift from being another boss in base game. The kit we have now is very basic, meaning not even veterans can get anything interesting out of it. And most of the time you're only incentivized to use one, the hot chocolate gun. Melee is very risky without giving a reward to make it worth it. So the only purpose for it is to be able to do damage when the enemies clear the gap and get up in your face. Next, if you die on the battlefield, you have to walk all the way back from the spawn point, missing out on the action. Which is another thing that plays Wicked Woods. You can still try to snipe with your gun, but you're not really doing a whole lot for the team. When I was first taking notes, I had more things to go off on, but now that I think about it harder, most of my original criticisms can be handwaved due to the revamp's improvements. So let's move on. After being Flurry, a door opens up to the side, allowing you to progress to Arctic Village's ultimate challenge. A solo venture at that. In the mountains of the Arctic, you're teleported to a massive arena with a giant blue ball being formed. Here there's a Templar guarding it. The Templar explains this is the birth of thousands of his species, which will inevitably lead to the same situation the player de-escalated in Arctic Village happening once more. Now we've come to the root of the problem, the only one left to slay is Tricor, Templar of the Frigid Lands. Gameplay wise, Tricor is most of what you would expect after facing the Frightgeist. Projectiles, a heavy slash, patches of land you can't touch, the whole shebang. One of the best parts of Tricor's fight exclusive to him is stage hazards. Periodically, the massive orb releases a shockwave causing either icicles to rain, or the snowflake symbol in the middle to light up and release shockwaves. These run at the same time as Tricor's regular attacks, spicing them up with an extra layer of hurt. A few of Tricor's attacks, most notably the tornadoes he spawns, will freeze the player, allowing Tricor to take off a life if you're unlucky, meaning you have to be more cautious, while still feeling fair. In fact, Tricore in general is a lot more fairly balanced compared to the Frightgeist. The latter's sword attack is a lot more difficult to avoid, meaning you can't attack nearly as much. Tricore, on the other hand, is a lot more fair, allowing the player to get into a groove and deal a lot of damage at the cost of being much closer to his attacks. One final thing Tricore adds is a last resort. Sensing his imminent demise, Tricore prepares a little but devastating attack to finish you off good, meaning you have to act fast to kill him, otherwise he'll rain frozen hell on you and end your run. Which ups the pressure tenfold and makes it all the more satisfying to finally beat him. After his death, you go up to the stairs, destroy the massive snow fetus thing, and end the reign of terror caused by the snow golems, capping off the event on a high note. Now on to the negatives. Recall that the update to these fights comes with a new kit. Before the update, you only had a sword, meaning you needed to go up close to wail on the boss, once again forcing you into a rhythm which is very satisfying to pull off. However, with the introduction of a ranged weapon and a decrease from 8 lives to 6, it's simply more advantageous to walk away and fire from a distance. The added distance making it easier to dodge. This, unsurprisingly, makes for a much less interesting fight, as any trick he can pull suddenly has a nerfed reach from what was intended. And as always, the massive map made for a select few attacks means for most of them, there's no risk in just walking away, which is quite anticlimactic. Aside from this, I don't have many complaints. A good fight, but still lacking in key areas. This closes the door on the events. In 2020, because 2 years later it will be updated with a key to find in the Frigid Wastes, giving you a badge that leads to another game, nowadays available for anyone to play. I'm of course talking about the Christmas event of 2022. This one's premise is pretty simple. You arrive at a holiday house and take a nap. However, because you slept next to an anomalous gift, your dreams become reality and you must face whatever nonsense your mind can conjure up. The first levels aren't too notable, mostly just there to ease you into the premise and general aesthetic of the game. Although I will bitch about how Quiet Woods gets way too brutal at the end with its enemies, and should be dialed down a notch for future players. Though there is some enjoyment to be gained from these, and you can't really have the whole experience without them. But anyway, for the main event, barging into the 3rd level, for the Warp Zone, thanks Corrupt, you arrive in an even more desolate zone than most of CheeseBurger Crusade's environments. You're given the Holy Sword, only previously used for the main game's first secret boss, and the first movement option in the game's history, a dash that when activated before jumping, sends you flying in the direction of choice. This most likely wasn't even intended, as dashing on the ground grants a minimal distance. Turns out bugs do make the best features. After that short tutorial, you'll find Tricore at the end of the path, ranting about how he'll kill you for killing him. But before he can get into that, he's unceremoniously killed by the actual boss, Azurath. Okay, before we start, I just want to say how funny this is with the context that we've previously been given. We kill Tricore to basically abort his species, and we give such a little of a shit about it that when he comes back in our dreams, the only thing worth noting to us is he sucks and he's weak. We conjure up a strawman version of him in our dreams to have a stronger guy come in and one-tap him for us to fight. Our character is never beating the murder hobo allegations. So, what about Azurath? Well, let me tell ya, this is the first major boost in quality for these bosses. This super boss, as you might recall if you watched the first video, has a ton of variations in his attacks that he uses relentlessly to pummel you into the ground. To your aid is the aforementioned dash and the sword arc, which does a ton of damage and is basically impossible to win without. A lot of trial and error is required to understand all of these, but it's worth it to master all these attacks and features, as with enough practice you can eventually start running laps around Azurath. It takes a lot of skill, but you can just start taunting him by dashing opposite of him to wait out his faster attacks. After enough time, he'll run out of energy and go back into his phase 1 attack for you to stomp on him with your M1 before going back to his usual chaos after charging up. And that's actually about it when it comes to Azurath specifically. Outside of my usual criticisms of Melee not battering much, and the map being big enough to run away from the boss with no consequences, I don't have much to say. Just a fun boss with CBC's recurring flaws. Just like Wicked Woods, a little more lies beyond the surface, with round 2 coming eventually, which I'll be more than eager to go check out when it's done. And which you should too. Every one of these events will have a link in the description for you to play. Well, on to the next. Next up on the list is another wave-based shooter in the same vein of Arctic Village. This time though, we have plenty of upgrades based on the tycoons from yesteryear. As for the story, Banlandian troops are coming to kick your ass, good luck. Here's the dynamicism of enemies is at its peak. We got rocket launchers, flying enemies, warplanes, enemies that go into rage mode at half health, ones that have rage the second you hit them, teleporters, invincible threats that need to be disabled by collecting certain items and weighing them out respectively, etc, etc. And what I've described is just off the top of my head. Every enemy has its own little quirk or two unique to it that really impresses me. It truly feels like a collage of the old years of Roblox coming together to put aside their differences and jump you. And this goes for the various bosses as well. The Cleo-san duo have their, well, duo gimmick, of one being a Ravager and the other having more range capabilities. Destiny has attacks that spawn right on top of you, forcing you to keep moving, along with having to be damaged with range attacks only. Doom's fight is a race against the clock to kill him before he activates a game-ending satellite, and Xylarn does devastating amounts of damage, not to mention having incredibly deadly minions. The narrator gives you advice on how to deal with these in-game, and is quite quick to call for the final boss's death, which I thought was neat. Let's rewind a few moments to those upgrades I mentioned. The upgrade system is a welcome addition, if a rather simple one that I'd like to see elaborated on. Basically, the best strategy is to have someone be a banker that collects all the cash from enemies to buy upgrades with, as they do get quite expensive. And I will say, back when Strife was new, it took a bit of trial and error to find out what to get first. That's about it. I'd really like to see something more complex from Corrupt in the future, as I feel it's lacking here. Back on track with the bosses, after defeating Xylarn, the narrator reveals that everything we just did was to take the powers of Banland out of the picture so that he may rule it for himself, revealing himself to be none other than the guy with that one CBC render that everyone uses in their thumbnails without realizing where it's from. I will say, I liked how 1X was characterized. If you pay attention to the enemies like Nil for example, they do take after his image, leaving some foreshadowing. His fight itself emphasizes his shamelessness, using literally anything he can get his hands on to kill you. This includes barfing his insides out to do a lot of collateral damage, opening his heart to pump out projectiles, and even grabbing a sword lodged in his chest and throwing it right back at you. Presentation is once again at its peak here, with him even breaking the screen during the last phase of its fight. After beating him, he'll mock the player for expecting a transformation, as comes with most of the other event bosses, even once not even in the game anymore, and promptly leaves. Upon first release, this is where Studded Strife ends. However, a while after its release, Super Josh 1845 was added to the game. An extra super boss with strong attacks, double the health of 1x, and even a fabled black attack that kicks you from the game if you get hit by it. Talk about overkill. And I gotta say, I kinda hate it. Being damage sponges applies to both 1x and Super Josh, and with very little going on in their fights, and the lack of normal enemies piling in, which was present in every other boss, the fights become very boring very quickly. In fact, I'd say both of these fights feel like they were meant to be solo, of how the only way to be truly friended by either of them is to be the group bait. And no, I don't care that Super Josh is a joke boss. A joke boss should not be a bad boss, especially with the amount of effort put into it. That tangent aside, the most criticism I have to give is what I've been saying the whole time. There's a lack of focus on melee, and big maps don't have any movement options to justify their size. For the latter, you could say that there are walk speed upgrades, but they aren't that fast, and it still takes a while to get from point A to point B. This was especially noticeable with the glitch enemy, where you had to collect crystals to stop it from manifesting. It takes so long to go from one crystal to the next that I really started becoming bored with it. And once again, melee is practically useless, as why would you get your hands dirty when you can just spam range and be fine? Plus, it makes the enemies seem a lot less remarkable when you either won't notice or won't be affected by their gimmicks due to how range leads to a lot less interaction. If Slenderman and the Teapot Droid being unable to be melee was balanced by certain enemies requiring said melee, that'd make things more dynamic and engaging, but for now, the enemies don't get much of a chance to shine. Still, I consider April Fool's 2023 one of, if not Corrupt's best events. And believe me, it's not just because of Studded Strife. If you are particularly keen on looking at the details, you'd see Xylarn has a teapot at the hip that when clicked enough times drops itself, granting you the Teapot of Desolation, and killing Nil enough times drops the 1x teapot. This is because the April Fool's event is in collaboration with a game called Find the Teapots by Tricor, one of Corrupt's friends and the one whose self-insert you fight after the Arctic Village. Find the Teapots itself has 2 teapots of its own. Combining 3 out of 4 of these teapots allows you to bypass a special barrier in the final part of the event, Pottery Prison. So let's dive into the quest of the event to find the teapots, Fortress of Fates. To get to the fortress, simply go out of bounds, a short walk away from spawn. Once you get there, you're greeted by a palace of teapots overseeing unstable land. After you cross the path, you'll reach the main area, which is where you can go one of two ways. First, we'll take the right path, placing a teapot tome hidden in the base game on an altar to open up a library, giving access to the path with a teapot tome replica. So what about that replica? Well, first you grab a hammer from behind some bookshelves to break open the boarded door, and after reaching the end, throw yourself into the void. Doing so will lead you to the depths of the library where the real game begins. You got a few easy puzzles and jumps to do to open this door with free keys. Upon going inside, there's a computer hanging out next to some boxes. Clicking on it brings you to one of Windows' many screensavers of tubes. You're also given a gravity coil to follow along the path and make some shortcuts along the way. Eventually, you'll be able to destroy a teapot at the end, and after some parkour and lever pulls, find a blank teapot tome, where it'll ask, "What am I?" Inserting teapot tome will bring you to the end where the tome replica lies. You'll notice I'm just describing the events that happen in this game. Well, that's because this is not just some ordinary event. When this first dropped, we were sent here completely blind. The only things to rely on being our efforts as a community to find the hidden teapots here. So I can't really describe the feeling I got finally discovering how to unlock this and the next teapot to collect to you. Thankfully, said teapot is a lot more eventful. The Teapot of Destiny can be summarized as 3 challenges inside generic Roblox games from its olden days. The first of these being a get eaten by blank game. You'll notice nothing really works, not even the VIP door. After doing what comes natural, you reach the end and find a teapot, just laying there for you to grab and... Oh. Yeah, this one has its puzzle elements as well, specifically in this first part. Only takes a bit of combing the game to find the exit though. The next 2 levels are nothing I can really make a word salad over. Just know, it was the experience of seeing these for the first time that sold me on this part of the event. Besides the obby getting surprisingly difficult at the end, the most notable thing to me about these next 2 levels is that at the end of the staircase lies a path paved by the false teapots of destiny and the colors leaking out of them. Which I think is a great way to tie things together and tell you, this is where shit gets real. The last level expands on this feeling by throwing everything together into one collage of the many forgotten trends of Roblox. Really still has that feeling of finality, you know? So anyway, you reach the top where the real teapot of destiny lies, but it won't go down without a fight. A fight that I hate. Do you remember in the first video where my main complaint with Emerald Ethereal was that the first phase dragged on for way too long, being saved by the second phase being much faster and engaging? Well, that's the problem I have with this fight. Except this time, the second phase isn't even worth fighting to get to because it's just adding slightly more projectiles to each attack. The only difficulty comes from the fact that these attacks do way too much damage. Specifically, the lasers that come out of the ground will one-shot you. Funny thing about that, when you respawn, you have 0 invincibility frames. Couple that with not having the reaction time to jump over them because you switch camera angles, and these stupid things can take 3 or 4 lives in the same attack. Bullshit, I say. But don't blink corrupt. This one was on 2 other guys, so I won't hold this fight against him. Okay, while we're still here, a thought struck me while playing that I just have to share. This fight's bland color palette, combined with the sorta HD but not released skybox of mid-2010s Roblox, gives the vibe of a boss fight that you show your coworkers at 11 AM on a random Tuesday in some office. You get where I'm coming from? No? Nah, whatever. I still enjoy my time here, especially on day 1, but it's not perfect in any way. Now that that's over, let's get to the finale of the April Fool's event. Spawning in, it's clear this place is the hub for the whole event up to this point, with portals for both CBC and Find the Teapots and the specific teapots they have adorning the portals themselves. The walls of the superstructure are lined with massive teapots, some flowing with and to an ocean of tea. A grand door waits with 4 podiums for all 4 teapots. So, now that 3, or all 4 of your completionists, deposits are collected, the door opens up to reveal there's another podium for a teapot located in a whole nother Roblox game for the April Fool's event. God damn! Corrupt really doesn't play when he comes to these things, holy shit. I'm too lazy to get footage, so if you want to know what happens, click the link for it or Pottery Prison in the description. It's a better experience completely blind anyway. So, now that all 5 teapots are collected, the door finally opens for real. The floor is lined with the pictures of all the ceramic art you've seen so far. and one to collect in the very near future. This is combined with statues praising the things to an almost zealous degree. On the wall leading to the cell is a mural of teapot-headed life staring at some sort of orb, perhaps a god or holy symbol of sorts. The mural points you down to the first and only cell. Ignoring all warnings, you're given the only advice the game is willing to give your sorry ass, and opens up to the final boss of the event. Meet the Turret Tyrants. This is without a doubt Corrupt's greatest boss yet. Every one of my complaints with his lineup so far is shattered by this one fight. The map is the perfect size to give you room to breathe while letting you just run around in circles to heal. Speaking of healing, you can't. At least not without using the Dark Art, the only weapon at your disposal. And guess what? It's melee. You have to get up close and personal to deal damage, meaning attacks are more likely to actually affect you. And unless you want to die, you have to keep fighting, meaning you're always engaged with the fight. You've also got the dash or movement options, but don't you worry about that silly little jump glitch. Corrupt managed to fix it after how busted it was in Azuraph's fight, so no abusing your power will save you here. It's just a duel between you and the Turret Tyrant, and boy is it tough. This took me hours to beat when I first played it, due to just how relentless the title boss is. You need to adapt to its attacks or get bent. Corrupt also thought it would be funny if after you get to the second phase and the identity of the Turret Tyrant, Ouroboros, is revealed, that after enough time it'll whip out its ultimate attack, summoning tons of teapots to rain down upon you for summoning one last teapot to make sure you stay down. For the first dozen or so attempts, this will most likely be enough to crush any player. This lights a flame underneath their pants to do as much damage as possible for them, leading to more direct confrontation between the two forces. So yeah, without a doubt, this is the best showing of Corrupt's talents so far. The set piece of a cell populated by only fresh corpses with sickly yellow lighting, combined with the constant clashing between you and the boss to retrieve as much lost health as possible. It was a great time coming up with strategies to effortlessly dodge Ouroboros and bum rush him as fast as possible after learning all his tricks. Finally killing it really makes one feel accomplished for finally beating the event, which is what any good boss should do. Really, I have no complaints. Anything I could think of would be about what it's not doing instead of what it is doing, which I don't think would be fair. So yeah, just a great boss to cap off a good event. And that, my dear viewer, about caps off the timeline of CheeseBurger Crusade's events. Now don't get it twisted, there are certainly many others not listed, but that's simply because they are not playable at the moment and most likely won't be unless it's for a game night or something. Now while there is still more event related content planned, that most likely won't be until far into the future. As of now, Corrupt's main project is a CBC related spin-off called Wacky Land Warfare, which won't be ready until much later. That combined with delays and personal issues, and yeah, don't expect much in a while is all I'm going to say. Overall, Corrupt's many events and their bosses have a few key issues that, starting with his most recent fight, are hopefully gone. Though I'd like to see some of these concepts and events explored in the future. Most notably to me is the idea of upgrading as you go along the events, which I feel could lead to more replay value. But I'm also not against the idea of a full campaign you must navigate, i.e. Wicked Woods. My one true hope for CheeseBurger Crusade returns, however, is that we get more mainline content before any more events. Seriously, it's been like 2.5 years since I made the first video, and Diamond Block Lane is still not out yet. Now then, if you've made it this far, tell me, what do you think about all of this? I'd like to see what you think about these events. I mean, you know, if you, well, ever play them yourself. And, yeah, that's about all I had to say. Thanks for watching, my dear viewer. I'll see you next time.